Special Collections and Archives, John T. Richardson Library, DePaul University, Chicago, Illinois, the SrHelenPrejeanPapers, Spring Quarter 2020. I am sorry we won't be able to meet in person this quarter. My name is Morgen MacIntosh Hodgetts, and I have been a member of the DePaul University Library community since 2001. I really enjoy working with faculty and students to introduce the unique collections that are part of the library's resources. There is no way to replicate the experience of seeing and handling original letters and documents, but I do want to share some information with you about our collections, especially the SrHelenPrejeanPapers. In this presentation, I am going to describe Sister Helen's gift to the university, archival collections, and provide some context about how to access and use primary sources. In 2007, Suzanne Dumbledon, Professor Emeritus and former Dean of DePaul University School for New Learning, undertook a study of social justice leadership focusing on Sister Helen Prejean, Wangara Maathai, and Aung San Suu Kyi. Suzanne visited Sister Helen in New Orleans a few years after Hurricane Katrina devastated the region. During the visit to Sister Helen's home and Office of the Ministry Against the Death Penalty, Suzanne was told of Sister Helen's talent for keeping everything. Suzanne asked Sister Helen about her plans for her materials, fully aware that in addition to the human toll, Hurricane Katrina destroyed many libraries, archives, and museum collections. Suzanne instinctively knew that although Sister Helen's materials survived the 2005 storm, the letters, files, photographs, and book drafts stored in New Orleans needed to be preserved elsewhere. According to Suzanne, Sister Helen felt an emotional, intellectual, and spiritual connection with the people she met who represented the university and the library, including Reverend Dennis Holtschneider, former president of the university, Catherine de Graaf, former department head of Special Collections and Archives, and Reverend Edward Udovic, former vice president of the Division of Mission and Ministry. Sister Helen believed DePaul was a good fit because of our strong Catholic identity and commitment to social justice. She also sees a connection between her experience as an activist and St. Vincent de Paul. Quote, "Nuns owe St. Vincent de Paul, the university's patron and the apostle of charity, a debt of gratitude. St. Vincent de Paul found a way to get the nuns out of the convent and into the streets to serve the poor. He did that in 1610 and paved the way for other religious orders." End quote. In November 2010, Catherine de Graaf and I traveled to New Orleans to pack up Sister Helen's files. The materials were shipped to DePaul University Library using the FedEx delivery service. DePaul University's mission, our geographic location, and our Catholic and Vincentian heritage are all factors that influence the sources we collect, preserve, and make accessible to researchers. Sister Helen's ministry to death row inmates and advocacy work to abolish the death penalty speak to the values our DePaul community embraces. The core concept of her message, inspired by her Catholic faith, is that each person is worthy of love and deserves to be treated with dignity. In early December 2010, the FedEx shipment delivered the boxes that Catherine and I packed up in New Orleans. Special Collections and Archives staff members Andrea Bainbridge and Helen Fedchek unpacked and accessioned the collection. During accessioning, the library takes formal possession, meaning legal and physical custody of the collection, and creates a record documenting the size of the collection, measured in linear feet, information about the donor, and the date range and type of materials included in the gift. Primary sources are created by people as a natural process of going about one's daily life and interacting with the world. For example, when Sister Helen wrote her first book, Dead Man Walking, a lot of documentation would have been created, including letters to and from her editor, interviews she recorded and transcribed, and files of background research. The photograph of Sister Helen shows her seated in front of her computer in 1992, surrounded by a pile of books and papers on the floor next to her. Suzanne Dumbledon wrote the following description of the materials in a 2013 article. Quote, "The Prejean papers include correspondence with the meek and the mighty, the admiring and the curt, multiple drafts of manuscripts, trial transcripts with Prejean's marginal jottings, photographs of activities and persons about whom she is writing, evidence of organizations she founded and networks she joined, and personal memorabilia that give insight into her spiritual evolution, prayer life, and place within her religious community." In order for archivists to transform the materials that Sister Helen created, received, and compiled into a research collection, we have to organize the materials in a systematic and useful way. Special Collections and Archives staff member Helen Fedchek was the lucky person assigned to review every single item and determine the groupings of the materials. While she worked to understand Sister Helen's filing system and establish an intellectual arrangement, Helen managed the physical preservation of the collection. Documents that were folded were flattened, newspaper clippings were photocopied on acid-free paper, and items placed in special folders and boxes and labeled. This work took about a year to complete. Helen became the library's expert on the collection, developing an in-depth knowledge of the events, individuals, and issues documented in the Sister Helen Prejean papers. Archivists create descriptive guides to the collections they arrange and organize so that other staff members and future researchers understand the arrangement and scope of the materials. To understand what is in the boxes of an archives collection, researchers use a descriptive guide known as a finding aid. A finding aid usually includes the following elements: a short biography of the individual or history of the organization, a summary of the contents of the collection known as a scope and content note, how it is arranged and organized. Archivists use the term series to describe the categories of organization, and a list of the numbered boxes and titles of the file folders inside that box. To have a fully immersive experience using the Archives and Rare Books in DePaul Library's Special Collections and Archives Department, researchers have to visit and use the materials in person. Due to the unique nature of the materials and required preservation environment, researchers cannot check out the items and take them home. At DePaul, we do not digitize entire collections of archives due to privacy concerns, copyright issues, and expense. However, selected items are scanned for exhibits, instruction, and researchers. Researchers use the finding aids and talk with our librarians and archivists to become familiar with our archival collections and select boxes they want to use in our reading room. Ethics and copyright laws require researchers to cite the sources they consult for their projects. Review the library's how-to guide for citing your sources. Full identification of materials and archival collections require giving the author or creator, title or description and date of the item, name of the collection, box number and folder number, and name and location of the library, museum, or institution. Copies of execution warrants issued by the state of Louisiana were in the files of documents Sister Helen acquired in her role as spiritual advisor for Elmo Patrick Saunier. This is an example of a primary source available in Sister Helen's collection, along with a bibliographic citation for this primary source document. Sometimes it is really hard to read handwritten letters. If you have difficulty, please reach out to me and I will help. I hope that when the COVID-19 closure ends, you will be inspired to visit the Special Collections and Archives Department on the 3rd floor of the Richardson Library. I quoted 2 articles in this presentation, and this slide has the citation information for those 2 articles. Thank you.